The reason that Saquon Barkley was so incredibly valuable last year, and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs, and even a rookie coming into a situation, is if you're a really good team, if you have the other things covered, then bringing in a running back can be that final piece. But to me, taking a running back, if you have a lot of holes, is sort of putting the cart in front of the horse to some degree.
And especially in this draft, right? Especially when you're talking about earlier, when you think about Junkins and Henderson, who will be there in the second round, both players from Ohio State. This draft is deep in running back talent. And the reason that we saw Derrick Henry excel in Baltimore was because Baltimore was already a complete team. The reason we saw the Philadelphia Eagles and Saquon Barkley go win the Super Bowl is because they were already a complete team that had running backs who were being productive in years prior to getting these transcendent talents at the position. And so for me, if you're the Raiders and you can get not a better player at that position, a player that can help you at a different position and still get a running back later, that's a decision that I would make unless you feel that Ashton Genty is on that Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley level, which I don't at this point.
Yeah. Well, so of course, he just took my take at the very end. Because that is the take. I think it's a better way to look at it is if you are imagine if you could draft Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry. If that's your evaluation, there used to be this idea that if you can get a running back, that again, let's just use Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley as the gold standard right now, because they are, especially Saquon. If you could get a running back essentially 90% of Saquon, that's good enough. And you can get a running back that's 90% of Saquon in the second round, third round, maybe. You don't have to waste a top 10 draft pick. But I think what Saquon showed and what the Eagles showed, right? If you are a team that doesn't have all the pieces just yet, and you have a Saquon Barkley, that's not enough to completely transform your team. But if you're a playoff team, if you're a pretty good team, and you bring in a running back like a Saquon Barkley, yes, it absolutely positively can transform not only your offense, but your team as a whole now. It opens up everything. Now, this whole idea, though, that there has to be this set order in which you do it in terms of, right, putting the cart before the horse, etc., etc., I don't think that matters as much because, right, it's like, let's just dumb it down and make it as basic as possible, right? Let's say you don't have a great O-line. And so now the question is, well, do you draft Saquon Barkley or do you draft someone, to boost, you draft a new center or whatever it may be. And you would say, yeah, but like, listen, Saquon Barkley's going to be great, but we have such a trash O-line, like he's not going to be able to really have much production. And so you say, so we have to draft, someone for the offensive line. We can't put the cart before the horse. But if you believe Saquon Barkley to be that special, that great, that impactful, well, then you still draft him. Understand that you still need to do these other things, and you might even have to wait until next draft to truly get like an impact player on the offensive line. Then that's what you do. You just kind of have to bite that bullet. Imagine if, in a way, you could say that the Giants put the cart before the horse, and they drafted Saquon Barkley, and they should have maybe drafted other players to build up the team, then draft their big running back. But we saw that Saquon Barkley, even years after he got drafted, was still able to be record-setting. So you could draft a Saquon Barkley. If you're looking at your team on like a 5-year stretch, a 3-year stretch, a 4-year stretch, where you're like, it's going to take us 3 or 4 years to truly build a Super Bowl winning team. Because that's what this Eagles team was. This Eagles team took years to build into a Super Bowl winning team. That's what it took. It took legitimately years. Even if we just use Jalen Hurts's, the moment he was drafted, right? Like it took essentially 3, 4, 5 years to finally build a team that was complete in a way. And I know we can say, oh, well, in 22, but it doesn't matter. They lost technically, however you want to, frame it. It still took, this 4 or 5 year window to officially build this team. And so it doesn't matter if you drafted Saquon Barkley in year 1 of that window or year 5 in that window, quite frankly. And at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter. If you're talking about potentially how can we win today, immediately, right now, in this immediate moment, what puts us in the best situation to potentially win? Yeah, you could make the argument, you know what, having a big time running back, unfortunately, maybe doesn't help you if you have no quarterback or if you have an absolute decimated O-line and so there's nothing you can do. Again, you can just look at the Giants as an example of that. Sure, you can make that argument that take away Saquon, and if you gave the Giants, let's just say the Eagles O-line, that they could win a lot more games, right? Now I'm not saying they would be Super Bowl winners, but like they could have a lot more stability. You can make the argument for the Chicago Bears that if you take away a couple of his weapons for the Bears and just had a significantly better O-line, they would have been better poised, better positioned to win more games. Like I think those are fair conclusions to draw, but that's looking at it on the very, very short timeline. That's looking at it in terms of just year one. How do we maximize success in just year one? And sometimes that is the appropriate decision to look at. Sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes that's all the runway you have from either a GM, offensive coach, or head coach, owner, whatever. But if you're also looking at this on a greater time horizon, and you're looking at it, let's say you're the Broncos, let's say you're the Raiders, whoever, you're looking at it like the Raiders, for instance, are like, how do we take a big step forward, but also how do we position ourselves to start to actually compete for Super Bowls in the next 2, 3, 4 years? Same thing with the Broncos. Broncos want to take a step forward. They already took a huge step forward last season, and now they want to continue to take a step forward. And it's like, where do we go from here? So I just don't think that we can just kind of reduce everything down to just this formulaic of like, well, first you got to get the O-line, then you got to do this, and you can only draft a running back if you already have all the pieces there. No, because if you have the potential to draft Saquon Barkley, then you draft Saquon Barkley. You just do. Even if you can't have the immediate success with the Saquon Barkley quite yet, well then, you got to continue to build out your team. You understand. It's the same thing with drafting a quarterback to a bad team. You're like, hey, you're an amazing quarterback. It's going to take us a minute or two to finally, build out this team. Obviously, we're the last pick in the draft. We're a terrible team. We got our quarterback now. It's going to take us a second. It's going to take us a minute. Just the way it goes. And I think you can look at that with many massively impact players. That's why, again, I like to replace Saquon Barkley in this conversation rather than use Ashton Jeanty, because it's just kind of like you got to look at it through that lens. If you believe Jeanty to be as much of a beast as Saquon or Derrick Henry, then just ask yourself, if you have the potential to draft Saquon Barkley, well, then you draft no matter who you are. Quite frankly, if you don't have Saquon or Derrick Henry in this draft, well, then you draft them, right? I don't care. Chiefs have Pacheco, don't care. Saquon Barkley is better, right? Like no matter what running back you have at this point, it's like, oh, doesn't matter. Get him. Doesn't matter. If you have a chance to draft Saquon Barkley, you draft Saquon Barkley. Now, that's why it becomes a different discussion, where if you don't believe that Jeanty is going to be that guy, again, that's understandable. If that's your conclusion, that Jeanty won't be that much of a beast and won't be on the level of a Saquon Barkley or a Derrick Henry, that changes the discussion then, completely. And I understand that, but I'm not going to get hung up in trying to figure out how special or how elite a running back is going to be based off of what we saw him do in college and then what we can imagine him to do in the NFL. Like I'm not going to get lost in those weeds. I love getting lost in the weeds. I love drilling deep, but in terms of trying to like truly figure out how great a Jeanty will be, I just think that's I don't know. Like I said, there's just not a whole lot to be said based off of that. I think it's more interesting in terms of trying to discuss the philosophy of everyone trying to figure out when it's appropriate to draft to, and everyone thinks that they have it so locked in. And I personally don't necessarily see it that way, but I do think Saquon Barkley's success with the Eagles will definitely change how people view just running backs in general and how much they're willing to pay for a running back and how important a running back is for a team. And like we constantly see in the NFL, pendulums are always swinging. Just give it another 5, 6, 7 years and running backs will be back to not being a prized value. It's going to be all about safeties. It's going to be all about safety. You can't win a Super Bowl without a shutdown safety or whatever. It's going to be something completely random. Center. We're realizing that center is all. You can't truly be a great quarterback without an elite center. Everyone needs to find their center. Like it's just always swinging. Left, right, up, down, this, that. Give it another 10 years, we're going to enter into a defensive era where it's all about the defensive coaches again, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about low scoring, and it's going to be less about passing, and it's just the way it goes. And so right now is probably we're going to enter a somewhat peak running back, especially if a running back like Genti enters the league and has a huge impact. Like, let's say he gets drafted to like the Broncos or the Raiders, and now they go to the playoffs and win a playoff game or two. Like, right, it's going to be running back frenzy, man. It's going to be running back frenzy, just like we did with wide receivers, just like we will always do with quarterbacks, because quarterbacks are quarterbacks. But yeah, it's always funny to see kind of the tides change constantly in the NFL. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the running backs in this draft? Do you think the success of Saquon Barkley will impact kind of how running backs are viewed and how this draft will unfold in terms of running backs? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.